You're listening to the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe, a podcast of curated conversations with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development. Get ready for inspiring interviews, educational lessons, and thought-provoking discussions that will challenge you to execute something new and innovative that will drive results in your organization. And now, here's Dr. Tanya Lowe.
Hello. You're listening to episode 35 of the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Using my results-driven philosophy of strategy, leadership, teams, and customer experiences, I help organizations develop their best-kept secret, their human capital. This podcast is designed to expand the conversation with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development and what it really takes to create, develop, and maintain results-driven and high-performing organizations. Our guest today is Vaughn Sigmon, co-founder of Results Driven Leadership. This is going to be great. Vaughn is an international business consultant, coach, and leadership development expert with more than 40 years of experience. He is not your average leadership development expert, so let me tell you that now. He is a former Carmax executive. He knows what it takes to be a high-impact leader and manager. Rather than offering theory, his coaching and training provides common sense advice and direction based on real-world experience. And we know common sense isn't that common, so we are going to have a great conversation. It's no wonder that Carmax, the country's largest and most respected company in the auto industry, is a Fortune 100 best place to work. Vaughn is inspirational. His leadership methods are sure to impress. His mission is to improve the impact of executives and managers by enhancing their knowledge, skills, and abilities. Vaughn's motto is, no matter what business you're in the people business. I absolutely love that. Vaughn, welcome to RDO.
Dr. Tanya, I was so looking forward to being on here with you today. I love what you do. I love your website. I've been following it. I just got one of your books. I look forward to reading that. So thanks for having me on today.
Thanks for joining me today. I love that you said, forget all the theory. It's about common sense, right? And what made you just throw all that stuff away and say, I'm going to focus on common sense? Because we know common sense isn't very common these days, but I want to start there.
So, I'm going to answer that in two ways. First of all, I was very fortunate to have a great mentor early in my career who, Ted Boswell, and Ted, who does not live far from you there in Atlanta, is one of these folks that taught me that, and it's really where no matter what business you're in the people business came from. It's been around for a number of years as my philosophy or approach to leading teams and companies. But as I advanced and learned more about what the real challenges are in the workplace within organizations, it's very often, I think, and I've watched it transition over the past couple decades, and I think it hardly comes from our educational system, and that we're teaching now to pass a test, and critical thinking skills have kind of gone out the window. So people are taught what to think, not how to think. And that is creating a lot of the dysfunction and challenges within organizations. We got a workforce now that we need to think, we need for them to problem solve, not only their problems, but maybe our own clients' problems, but they're stuck.
Yes.
And so it's helping leaders be able to draw out those critical thinking skills because they're in them. We all have them.
Right.
It's helping them to understand that we can't tell, we need to ask. It's about your listening skills. It's about your questioning skills. And that is not natural for 90+% of the leadership out there. They want to have not a one way, but a very direct conversation, tell people what to do, move on to the next thing. Just doesn't work anymore.
It does.
May have worked in the 70s. It doesn't work today.
It doesn't work anymore. You mentioned critical thinking, and I've been on this little tour talking about the report that the World Economic Forum did around reskilling and upskilling the workforce for 2025. And so the report came out in 2020. And some of in addition to the technology changes that individuals need to prepare themselves for, a lot of the soft skills stuff, the largest skill for 2020 and 2025, critical thinking. And so there's not a class for it, but people need to, it's like, I was signing up for that critical thinking class. You create it by not telling people what to do all the time, giving them an opportunity to think. So, I mean, I wish I had my tambourine, because as you were talking, I was like, yes. That's it. That is it. We have to start teaching people how to think again. And Vaughn, it's kind of sad.
It is sad. And I think we've really hobbled a lot of our entry level to mid 30s, maybe early 40s generations, in that and I think it is part of what we see in all the anxiety and frustration and mental health issues, because it's tough to deal with life if I haven't been taught how to figure things out.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Right. And, listen, for you and me, it has created a huge industry around coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I benefited from a business standpoint, and certainly from a being able to give back standpoint. But there's so many, it doesn't get mentioned a lot in your ability to be an effective leader, is to be able to draw out critical thinking skills, teaching people to think. And not only that sounds really nice, but how the hell do I do it?
Yeah.
And so that's because you really have to fight your instincts as a boss or as a human, because it's just so much more efficient to tell somebody what to go do.
Yeah.
But then what we're transferring information from one supercomputer to another supercomputer, and that other supercomputer has not been programmed to unpack that information and then go create what is being asked of them. They don't know the steps or can't think through the steps. Mm-hmm. So these leaders are very frustrated because they've told you what to do. What's this?
Yeah.
This is what I told you to do. Well, it's because that supercomputer you just transferred information to could not process it.
They can't process. They can't come up with options. They can't, I'm working with a client right now, and she's a CEO, and one of her biggest challenges is to jump in and fix it for them. And I was like, no, you can't fix it for them. They will never learn it. It's just like they're your children. And so you have to ask them questions. I love John Maxwell's book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. Yes. You have to ask them questions. You have to allow them to break it. They can't break it, but you have to allow them to learn from the mistakes. And so I think that's why we see so many leaders who are burned out, because they're covering their entire workforce, or most of their workforce.
They're having to do all the thinking, all the problem solving, and that is a super large burden to be carrying on your shoulders.
Yes.
That if you finally resign yourself to doing something about it, can be fixed. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes practice, but it takes resolve.
Yeah.
And it's the smart leader who recognizes what we're talking about right here and says, you know what, I'm going to do something about it. Like, I'm sure this has happened in your life. It certainly happened in my career, that there was these milestones that all of a sudden I said, I've got to fix this about me. Mm-hmm. Because there is this, I call it the transformation triangle of change, is if I fix me, I become a better leader. That affects the folks who are reporting to me. They're going to be better at what they do, which it has a direct impact on the company's performance. And so it's understanding it's not your people's problem. It's not them, it's you.
Mhm.
That's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. It's a
All
really
the
tough pill.
Yeah, we have to start with us first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh my God, I could talk about this all day. So, since we're already talking about critical thinking, I already said it's one of the top skills people need to learn according to the World Economic Forum's report. Failure is a part of the learning process. How can leaders create a safe environment where team members feel comfortable taking ownership of their mistakes and learning from them?
Well, you referred to it earlier from Maxwell's book, Great Leaders Ask Great Questions.
Mhm.
And it's having your repertoire. This may be a little more extended response than you anticipated, Dr. Tanya, but one of the things that leaders have to understand is the behavioral profiles of the individuals that are working with them.
Yes.
And there's great assessment tools out there that just reveals all this. You get a mirror into their DNA of whether they have critical thinking skills, whether they're more dominant, whether they're more passive. And then I have to adapt my approach to what is going to work with that type of profile. That's the first step. Get a DISC report, get a Myers-Briggs report, get something to understand. It's the best to me.
Yeah. And then
it's one of
use
the best
it.
investments.
And then use it, right?
And use it. But here's what's happening. You've seen this too, is companies invest in these and everybody gets their report and they say, oh, this is really cool. This is exactly how I am. And then don't do anything with it. There's not a follow-up training or instruction or support system of how do I take that and then apply this to what I do every day.
Yeah.
And so it's understanding the behavioral profile, how people that work with you process their information. Some, which are always our favorite employees, are the ones they've got all the initiative. They you don't have to tell them but once. They figure things out on their own.
Mhm.
That's about 11% of the population. Now we're dealing with other 89% that don't have those skills, and that's where the frustration and the stress comes from. So what do I need to do? And so you have to teach them to think by making them think. Mm-hmm. So if I'm, here's our goal, here's what we need to accomplish. How do you think you need to go approach this? Mm-hmm. Have them start repeating to you what they think. Mm-hmm. You have to be very patient. You can't jump to the conclusion and say, no, this is what you need to do, dummy. Yes. It's massaging these responses through open-ended questions and getting them to unpack the information. You'll understand where their levels, where their wall is and of what they know. Then allowing them to go try and fail. You start with smaller type of projects and responsibilities. Don't yell, don't get mad, don't write up, don't do any of those things. But you also have to be available. And that's the second part of it.
Yes.
Is, we tell them, we shut the door, then we expect them to go do it. And there's 70% of the population that do not want to ask you a question. They don't want to bother you. They don't want to interrupt all the important work that you're doing all day. They'd rather ask somebody standing next to them how this should be done versus go find the expert to ask how this is going to be done. We don't know whether the person standing next to them knows how to do it or not, or they feel even uncomfortable asking that person because we've got ego, we got self-esteem involved in all this. Mm-hmm. I don't want to embarrass myself for asking questions that I think everybody thinks I should already know, right? So I'm a failure. But the failures often come again from leadership's direction and availability.
Yeah.
It's I had a gentleman years and years ago that worked with me that coined the term to me. I think it's been around for a while, managed by walking around. Mm-hmm. And so, it's even if you're working in a bunch of cubicles all day, get up and walk around, touch base, be available, be visible, be that boss. You have to change. I know you have work to do. time block yourself to get that work done, but you also have to time block to get up out of your seat and be out there making the rounds and be available. What questions do you have? How can I help? What do you need? And as you continue to massage that part of your leadership toolbox, you'll start getting the questions. You'll make it safe. You'll avoid the mistakes. But even if they make a mistake, you catch it early.
Yes.
You can fix it early so that, the closer you can catch it to the event, to the inception of the mistake, fix it there, the better they're going to learn.
Absolutely.
And ask the simple question, what did you learn from this? And how would you do this differently in the future? It's two
One
questions.
of my favorite questions. What did you learn from this?
What did you learn from this? And you have to watch your facial expression. You have to watch your body language. You have to watch your emotions around all this. But you have to be that uncle-like individual that says, okay, Dr. Tanya, I know we did this. What did you learn from it? How would you do this differently in the future? Yeah. And you soften yourself. It's understanding the modulation of your voice. But that's all, part of leadership development, is understanding these little nuances to interacting with your folks all day to make sure they feel safe. Yes. So it's that manage by walking around, ask a lot of questions, be available to them, and make them feel safe.
Make them feel safe. Guys, I hope that this piece of the conversation is so important. You actually start out with, listen, leaders need to be great listeners and be patient because once you bring somebody into the organization, the way they showed up in the interview oftentimes might not line up with what you get when it's time for the work to start. So you got to be patient, create that environment, be available, leave the nest. I love that. Get up from your desk, walk around, talk to people. You can't be afraid of the people on your team. You got to talk to them, engage with them. I believe, unfortunately, too many leaders, they're afraid to ask those hard questions because they think they're probably going to get something that either they can't fix, or they don't want to deal with, or something. And we've got to, it's a mindset. We got to change that mindset. So with that being said, what do you believe are the biggest challenges leaders face today, and what's needed to eliminate or minimize those challenges? Now, you have a lot of experience. You've seen a lot of leaders. You've seen from your time at Carmax and in your own business. So just kind of think about that overall. What challenges do you see today?
So really great question. And it comes down to one of your blessings as a leader is your sense of urgency. One of your curses is your sense of urgency. Now, you're creating additional work for yourself because you don't have the patience, or you have too much urgency to see things get done. And they're doing it wrong. You want to fix that mistake. You can do it better and faster because we got other things to get done.
Right.
But you will never get that pressure off your shoulders if you don't slow down your sense of urgency a little bit, work them up through delegation. Many leaders don't delegate because they won't do it fast enough, or they won't do it right, or it just take me 5 minutes. It may take them all day. Well, so what? Right? Let them take it all day. Is that going to be the end of the world?
Right.
Certainly you have to be selective about that, but I see delegation as one of the biggest roadblocks to your employee success, because we're trying to keep everything right here, which is just creating this tsunami of problems for yourself. You think you're solving problems by keeping things close to you, but you're actually creating problems because you're teaching them two things. One, if they don't do it, you will.
Yeah.
Don't think that's the lesson you want to teach, but that's what you're teaching. And I don't trust you I don't trust you with any responsibility, which that creates all these internal perceptions about what you think of me. And listen, we as humans worry a lot about what others think of us. And let's just go to some statistics here. Gallup just recently released their latest poll on employee engagement. 14% of 3 million employees are engaged. 14%.
Right.
And asked why? This is painful to hear. It's their boss. It's the person they directly they're responding to. So what's the problem? They don't trust me. They don't care about me. They don't trust me. And do you really not? Well, okay, then don't complain about how many hours you have to work. Don't talk to me about having to work weekends. Don't talk to me about all the stress, because you need to learn, slow down that urgency, give up a little trust, allow people to earn that trust back. They don't have to get it all in a day. It's going to take weeks and months, but in time, you'll all of a sudden look around and say, wow, my job just got a whole lot easier and I'm getting more done.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does.
I've
done it.
Now,
I've
right?
seen dozens of others do it, but it takes commitment and it takes some patience. So the short answer is slow down your sense of urgency, delegate, and then take your time to allow people to earn your trust, but you have to grant trust in order to earn trust.
I love it. I love it. Everything that you were talking about, to me, I heard succession planning. Leaders who they're holding on to information. They're, if you don't do it, I will. That is absolutely not the precedent that you want to start. And I've seen that with some recent clients where they're trying to get people to shift, and it's just gone on for too long, because it's also, when these behaviors go on for so long, it's hard to change them. And so change has to take place on both sides, the leader's side and the employee's side. But succession planning is so important, because as you start developing the employees in your organization, you can go on vacation. You can send, Susie to a meeting and not worry about it, because you've put in the work of delegating and shaping and developing that individual for the future of in your organization, or maybe some other organization. People are so worried about that. What did they leave? And my response is, but what did they say? What did they say? So we've got to change our mindset around that, and deal with our sense of urgency, delegate, and create the workforce that, I always say, create the workforce that you dream about, create that workforce. So, we talked about delegation, we talked about sense of urgency and the leaders, some of the biggest challenges that leaders face. Consistency and accountability are really important. How can leaders model consistency and accountability and set an example for their team members to follow? Now, we've been talking about critical thinking. I think we have a theme going here that I didn't think about initially, but this theme is coming together. You've talked about the how leaders can break through one of the biggest challenges that you see, but then how do they consistently model that behavior? Because I believe a leader's consistency, also managing themselves, holding themselves accountable, and then holding other people accountable. How do they model that behavior so that it is replicated throughout the organization?
So make a goal, write down the goal, right?
Yeah.
That's the very first thing. Is if you really want to change, you've got to get it in writing. If it's not in writing, it does not exist. There's something magical about putting pen to paper or fingers to the typewriter. I just said typewriter in 2023 and into the Word document. And that is the beginning of it. Make a goal, make it reasonable, but put a time limit to it. You want to get it done. It's a SMART goal. In what time do I want to be able to feel comfortable, but what source of feedback am I going to be getting? How do I know? And so you have to create a feedback loop in there, and that can come from 360 feedback. It can be taking one of your key employees and being very transparent with them, letting them know that this is what I'm going to be working on, and I need you to be brutally honest with me. I'm going to trust you with that feedback. I'm going to grant you the ability to give your boss feedback. Maybe your boss is the right person to give you that feedback. Be transparent with your boss. This is what I'm working on, but get another person involved so that you've got a feedback loop, or a very broad feedback loop of 360 feedback, or get a coach.
Yeah.
Get a coach, get a mentor. It's one of the wisest investments. Now, the fact that we're coaches, I'm not shilling the services. I'm not trying to get anybody to hire us, but let me tell you, it is critical to have that person from the outside, a third party, objective person who will call you on your stuff, will hold you accountable, does not report to you. So there's no pressure on what needs to be said. A great coach is going to shoot you straight, but it's going to help you critically think in order to solve your own problem. So set a goal, set a time to it, get regular feedback, measure your success. It may be a slightly intangible KPI, but you need some level of KPI so that you know whether you're getting better. And then let me tell you, any habit change requires, again, a loop of reward. And because that reward as part of a changing habit, it's getting on the scales if I'm trying to lose weight. It's being able to run the extra mile if I'm trying to do a marathon. There has to be some kind of gain. So what am I looking for? And that's where you need a coach to help you understand in your situation, what am I looking for that I can measure this against? And then from an accountability standpoint, if your coach is going to see you in a couple of weeks or in a month, and you have to report back to this coach, it's just like having a gym buddy. You have to report back to this coach what your activities have been. You're committing to activities, the things you're going to be doing. It tends to start working really well for you. That is the way to do it. But you can't do it on your own. You can't do it all in your mind. You can't do it just because I feel like I can do it. It has nothing to do with your feelings. It has everything to do with your actions and commitment. And so there's my advice.
I love it. I love it. I mean, it doesn't get any simpler than this. And what you said, we apply this to so many different areas in business, in organizations, sometimes in our lives. Write it down, make the goal, write it down, set a time frame, SMART goals, and then actually put some I call it put some feet on it, execute it. You've got to execute it. Wow. Vaughn, we've been talking, and a lot of what we've been talking about, to me, it sounds like I'm hearing three words. I'm hearing three words in my head: development, relationship. You've got to have a relationship with your team. It can't be a us and them type of thing, but it has to be a relationship. And then vulnerability. Vulnerability. It's being able to say, I don't know. I don't know. Let's work together to find this out. I don't have all the answers. Okay, I need some help. Being able to say that. So, and that can be difficult sometimes for people. So can you share an experience that maybe you've had, or a time where you had to, an example of a difficult conversation that you've had as a leader, and the lessons you learned from it? And what are some common barriers that prevent leaders from having these difficult conversations that will allow them to display vulnerability and create the relationships needed to have results-driven, to become a results-driven leader and have a results-driven organization?
So we often, another great question, and we often place more pressure on ourselves than need be on our level of knowledge around things.
Okay.
And then understanding truly where respect comes from. Respect is earned, not granted with a title. And I can tell you about a personal experience, and it was something I needed to work on from my own leadership toolbox, that I needed to improve on something. But it's let me just tell you a story. I think the answer lies in this story. So I used to get 360 feedback in my corporate life, and I take great sense of pride that my team led the organization year after year after year after year after year after year in results.
Yeah.
I had an amazing team working with me, and each year, from a KPI standpoint, we blew every other division out of the water based on our results. Very proud of that. But when we start getting down into the soft skills part of it, the behavior part of it, there was this constant feedback I was getting, not in a majority, but there was enough of it that it was consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very kind in how they worded it about me, was my level of passion. Vaughn's passion sometimes can come across as being too aggressive. And, we're on a Zoom screen here, so you can't see my size, but I'm 6'3". I'm 225 pounds, used to be larger, but I'm a big guy. I'm a loud guy. And I was also a very passionate guy. And I wanted things done, and I wanted it done right. And I wanted it done quickly. And if somebody was giving me any foot dragging, I just got louder.
Yeah.
And sometimes they bought in, sometimes they fell to my intimidation, and they went and got it done. But I was not creating this relationship we were talking about. They were doing it because they had to, not because they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And so this passion feedback of being too passionate, too aggressive, I decided, well, actually my boss said, Vaughn, this keeps showing up in your 360 feedback. When are you going to do something about it? And I said, thanks for kicking me in the butt a little bit. And he really didn't say it any harder than that. But I said, you know what? You just prompted me to go do something about it. He says, well, whatever you need to do, go do it. So I started doing some research around what my issue was, and found out it's a fairly common issue, and found a book, and found a course, some seminars around difficult conversations, and read the book, went to the seminar, and learned a lot about myself. It was very intense. It was very well led. But I had set a goal. I'll back up. Let me take my own medicine here. I committed in writing to my boss that this was my strategy, that by this time next year, there would be zero 360 feedback on that topic. Mm-hmm. And in fact, my stretch goal on that was people would actually compliment me on my ability to drive and lead people without being extremely aggressive with that.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty big goal for me, but I know me well enough.
Yeah.
I knew I could do it, but I knew it was going to take commitment. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the seminar. I took a lot of notes. I came back and started practicing the key elements that I needed to start practicing right away, immediately. One of the things it taught me was how to identify the triggers. What makes you get aggressive? And how do you know you're about to get aggressive? What are the physical signs that you know this is about to come? And for me, it's this little tickle up the back of my neck and the base of my skull. When I'm about to get very worked up about something, I feel that tingle.
Mm-hmm. I call it the rah-rah. The rah-rah is on the way.
It's about to happen. And so, this course taught me when I saw that, detected that, grab it, stop it, redirect my thoughts.
Yeah.
And the one thing it taught me to do, rather than pushing back or arguing or stating my case, to stop, ask a question.
Mhm.
Ask a question that allowed me time to redirect my thoughts and come across as being less aggressive
Mhm.
and slow me down a little bit, because my nature had to be redirected.
Mhm.
And so I didn't always wait for that tingle. I tried to anticipate this before the tingle ever showed up, because then the fuse was lit. But slowly, very deliberately, I told my boss, I told a couple of my direct reports, this is what I'm working on. I told my regional director of human resources. I told one of my key direct reports. It was Ron Costa, who was the regional vice president of purchasing. I said, this is what I'm working on. I'm going to rely on you to course correct me, because you're in meetings with me all the time. You're in the stores with me all the time. Give me feedback. I'm going to ask you after every interaction, how did I do? How did I do? How did I do? And I want it right between the eyes. And I wasn't perfect, not in the beginning. They had to course correct me a few times. I'm not somebody that takes feedback very well. This taught me to take feedback very well. That was another aspect of this learning journey that I was going through. And fast forward through all this, I continue to not only work on it, but start to notice the changes. People were more engaged with me. They started to seek me out more often. By me making myself vulnerable, letting people know that I recognize the problem. I know I have to work on it. I have to go get educated on how to do this. I don't have the answers today. I'm going to go get help to do it. Now they're bought into it with me. They're on my journey with me. They want to help me out because I've trusted them in the inner circle to help me along with it. They're giving me feedback. I'm sharing more. I'm asking more questions of more people. How am I doing? I recognize this as probably, how am I doing? How am I doing? Knowing that I'm the boss, and that, sometimes this feedback is going to be slanted, but I knew the people that worked with me that were the high D's on the disc scale that just didn't care about my feelings, and they would tell me exactly what they were thinking. So I was selective about who I was asking, but I was asking the people that I knew would be direct with me, and just measured how often, how many meetings could I come out of that I did that very well, or I slipped up. How many interactions within the stores did I do that very well? How many times did I slip up? So fast forward to the end of the year, I really dedicated myself to this. I thought about it every day. I had to begin every day with the mindset, remember, this is what you're working on for your personal development. And by you working on this, all these great numbers that your team has been delivering will actually get better. And lo and behold, I reached my goal, 0 feedback. In fact, I had 2 or 3 comments out of the 28 or so of the 360 feedback that had made comment and so I reached not only the goal of 0 feedback negatively, but positive feedback. I got 3 bullet points of feedback on how I had changed in my approach. But this is weird. I was so proud of these numbers my team was delivering to the organization, to the shareholders. They got better.
The numbers got better.
How could they get better? They were already the best. They got better. And so that was just one of those realizations that you set the goal, make yourself vulnerable, ask for help, go seek help, be willing to take the feedback, work on yourself, be committed to yourself, and have that source of information that's going to be willing to course correct you when you need to, then have something to measure it against. And so that's, hopefully that answers your question, Dr. Tanya, because that is my journey. I am more than willing. In fact, I had a coaching session with a brand new client yesterday that he and I have very similar disc profiles. He has the very similar issue that his company has sought coaching for him that I had to address with myself. I could relate very well to him and told him, listen, I'm your coach. But hell, I was in that seat. I know exactly what you're going through.
Right.
I can very well relate to this. Let me take you on my journey. I'm going to help you with your journey, and let's go get you there. Let's get this off your back.
Yeah.
And so you have to understand that when you make yourself vulnerable, those around you who have a level of trust will jump more on board with you than not respect you. We worry, again, I mentioned this earlier, so much about what people think of us. They'll actually think more of you when you're authentic and vulnerable and really being yourself. They'll have a higher level of respect for you. It's hard to believe that until you've experienced it. But try it, and I promise you that you'll see the opposite of what you fear. And I love the acronym FEAR, F-E-A-R, false expectations appearing real. So we're predetermining outcomes of things in our mind. We have this catastrophic mindset. So
before we have all the data, it's all falling apart.
Yeah, everything's going to blow up. Everybody's going to hate me. Everybody's going to make fun of me. They're not going to choose me on the baseball team, whatever. It's the opposite is always true.
Vaughn, I love, thank you so much for sharing your story, because I believe that many leaders can relate to that in some shape, form, or fashion. I can relate to it. And so, as leaders need to recognize their triggers, get some support. I love the DISC and the suite of DISC assessments. They're great tools for looking at getting a baseline of where you are and how you can improve and be better. But one of the key things you said was you didn't try to do it by yourself. You got accountability partners. Like, look, this is what I'm doing. I need your support. You gave them permission to be honest with you and give you honest feedback. And we've got to stop. I call it being feedback bullies. We've got to stop being a bully when it comes to feedback. Everybody's not hating on you. Some people are trying to help you. And so if you let your guard down a little bit, that's where that vulnerability comes. Let your guard down a little bit and allow people to be honest with you, then things can get better. Because when we get better, everything gets better. Vulnerability is required to being a results-driven leader and creating a results-driven organization. That was so yummy. So Vaughn, what are you reading as we wrap up here? What are you reading that we should be reading?
So I just picked up this book. I'd read what I thought I'd read this book, but it's a similar title, which it's the one that I'd read was it's Your Damn Ship. Now I'm reading Turn This Ship Around. And it's a highly regarded book. It was actually recommended by Simon Sinek on it's a true story. And I'm a little bit of a military nut. My father was military for 30 years. So anything that is around the military, and the Navy has a lot of these stories because they rank their ships. There's a ranking, there's a feedback loop for how you're doing as a commander in the Navy. And this is about a submarine commander and how he took over the worst submarine in the fleet and turned it into the best submarine in the fleet. And it's all the things we talked about today, Dr. Tanya, that's in that book. And so it's I watched this commander's journey of what he saw, what he took over, and then how he got buy-in, how he got commitment, how he had to make himself vulnerable, how he had to build these relationships with his core. And then as in time, he started seeing progress, but he never had to tell anybody to do anything. He got them to the point where they understood their responsibilities, and through his leadership, they turned the ship around through their efforts of wanting to make the commander look great, but he never asked for that.
Wow.
That was the byproduct of all of his effort of being vulnerable, asking questions, delegating, committed to answering questions, being committed to allowing them to think for themselves. You know, he's got several instances in there where he saw a seaman doing something. He says, "Why are you doing that?"
Mm-hmm.
And well, because this is, you know, what I'm supposed to do every day. He says, "But why are you doing it? I mean, that because you're supposed to do it is not a why. Why are you doing this?"
Right.
And he said, very often I'd ask those kind of questions and they stop and say, "I don't know why." Well, let's figure out why you're doing this. And that's back to those critical thinking skills, is as he helped these seamen unpack their responsibilities and understand the why behind their jobs, why this is so important to this ship. It may be just polishing a piece of brass, but why is that important to the success of this submarine?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of little things adds up to a lot of big things.
Yes.
Is essentially what is in that book.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll be adding this to our list. No matter what business you're in the people business. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We've been chatting with Vaughn Sigmon, co-founder of Results Driven Leadership. Visit the show notes page to see how to connect with Vaughn. You'll also find a link to his podcast. Be sure to grab a copy of Results Driven Organizations, the 4 Keys to a High Performance Workplace. You can use the link in the show notes page and grab our special gift to you for being a valuable listener. Until next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Be sure to review the show notes for the resources mentioned, and don't forget to grab your free gift available at freegiftfromtanya.com. Until next time.